Yeah, we loud, yeah, we gritty. I'm a little frustrated, but I still love my city. Yeah, north side, south side, west, we united.
We're in round 7 of the NFL draft 2026. Q, you called this Christmas weekend for NFL fans. How's your Christmas been?
You know what? Overall, I give this Christmas a B. I might not have got all the toys I wanted, but I got enough that's going to keep me stimulated and keep me intrigued, at least for the next couple months. And that's all you can ask.
That's not bad.
And I will say, one of the best toys on my wish list, which I didn't even have on my wish list, I ended up getting. So I had a nice surprise in the first round. The first gift I opened was something I didn't even expect. So I'm pretty much a happy kid.
I'm happy to hear that, because for the most part, Chicago was like draft day. You know what I mean? Going back to 2 years ago when we drafted Caleb Williams, that was, in my opinion, Q, one day, that's going to turn out to be a top 5 day in Chicago history.
I agree. And if Rome can stay healthy and start fulfilling its potential, it's going to be a legendary draft. I think if Caleb Williams continues on this trajectory, regardless, it's a legendary draft, because there's no more important position in the NFL than quarterback. So
I'm certain that the Bears are putting together a good enough roster that in the years to come, the Caleb Williams draft, the 2024 number 1 pick, is going to go down as one of the biggest days in Chicago history. Not just Chicago Bears, not just Chicago sports, Chicago history. In fact, I got a top 5 list. Top 5 list of best days in Chicago history. I got 2 outsides looking in. I don't know the exact date, but it was probably somebody from out west that one day got out their bed, walked past that patchy grass field that they got in front of their little.
They got grass out west?
They ain't got no grass. They ain't got no grass out west. They went to the gas station, got some Doritos, and decided, I'm gonna put some meat and cheese on this. That's a top 10 day in Chicago history. I don't know what day it happened, but I know it happened probably late 90s, early 2000s. It's a top day in Chicago history. Number 6, Chicago Cubs winning the World Series.
I agree with that.
And I'm specifically talking about 2016. I'm not talking about the other 2 that happened in that happened in 1908 and 1906. I'm not talking about those. 16, top 5. November 1972, Bears Tower named the tallest building in the world. Number 4, April 29th, 1983. Q, what happened that day?
April 29th, 1983. I wasn't even alive then. How you asking me about stuff before I was even born?
Chicago. That's the day Harold Washington was inaugurated.
Won the mayoral election. Okay.
There
Long
you go.
live Harold
There you go.
Washington. That's the greatest mayor in Chicago history.
Easily. Hands down. No disrespect to Lori Lightfoot. Number 3. I don't know what day it happened, but it was in 1950. Harold P. and his wife opened the first Harold's Chicken.
I was going to say, Harold's better be on the list.
It's got to be on the list. And ever since then, Chicagoans, their hearts have been pumping mild sauce instead of blood.
Pioneers.
Number 2, I think it was February 5th, 1986, Bears win the Super Bowl.
Now, I know that one.
Now, I know you're thinking, what could be number 1? If the Bears Super Bowl's number 2, what could be number 1?
Whatever day Michael Jordan was drafted in 1985.
Ooh, that's an OLIQ. He ain't been back ever since 98. He ain't been back.
Don't matter. He left a nice little impact.
He did. But this day cannot be forgotten. On July 7th, 2017, I walked in the home of the hoagie, made my order, and I got my order in 10 minutes and walked out.
You got out in 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
I think you're going to tell me the earth is flat after that, because there's no way you got out in 10 minutes after you ordered. That's why I need you to repeat that, because you're lying. I could tell what administration you support now.
It's history.
I'm gonna need video footage of that.
If we were still doing recording everything back then, I would have definitely recorded that, because that's history. Top 5 day in Chicago history. But I've been reading online, and there are mixed feelings about the Bears draft. I know there's been our co-host has had some mixed feelings about the Bears' first few picks, but before we get into the Bears and how they've done, Were there any surprises you had Thursday night watching the draft?
I didn't see Dylan Thieneman last into pick number 25. I really felt like he would be gone in that 13 to teen range. I was sure he wasn't getting past Minnesota. I mean, he was mocked there for a reason. He looked like a replacement for Harrison Smith, and even more important because he's a little different than Harrison Smith. He's got more range, more man coverage ability. He's not quite the thumper. Harrison Smith is almost like a fourth linebacker. Thieneman can play in the box, but I wouldn't mistake him for linebacker. He's just a great playmaker, and I figured you being in the NFC North and every quarterback being better than you and everybody's pass offense being better than you, you're going to deal with Caleb Williams. You're going to deal with Jordan Love. You're going to deal with Jared Goff. And you're going to deal with Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Christian Watkins, Tucker Craft, and Colson Loveland. I would think that getting a safety would be very, very important, especially one with the skills of Dylan Thieneman. So that was my shocker that Dylan Thieneman lasted to 25 before his slide ended. I was also very surprised that the Rams took Tyler Simpson. That was a shocker to me. I spoke about him previously. I didn't have him very highly graded. I did not have Simpson highly graded. I had Mendoza as head and shoulders above him. And I know Mendoza went number 1, but the fact that Simpson, what was he, 12 or 13, I believe.
16.
And a lot has been made about Sean McVay's reaction. He didn't seem overly enthused to land Tyler Simpson, and I share that. I wouldn't have been enthusiastic to land Tyler Simpson either, especially not at pick 13. I think he does have a good arm. I just think there's a lot of mechanical issues and breakdowns. I didn't like the way he performed in some of the big games that Bama played. That is my biggest indicator about a college quarterback. How do you perform against elite level competition? I just wasn't a huge fan of Tyler Simpson.
It was really weird when they were introducing Ty Simpson. And John McVay, like you said, he did not look like he looked like he was just along for the ride. But minor point on that. At some point, I mean, it's a smart move. It's a smart move to bring in somebody who's like that, who's actually got, I guess, a top 60 grade, you know what I'm saying, for a quarterback. And because the Matt Stafford thing is going to end at some point. So you can at least get him in there where there's no pressure. You can learn from the McVay school of quarterbacks. It's done a lot for a lot of other quarterbacks. So it's a smart move on their part. Maybe McVay didn't really like that pick because maybe he wants to, somebody who can help them now. But for the organization, I understand it. I understand it a lot. It's a heady play.
How do you feel about Ty Simpson as a quarterback, though?
I'm not impressed. No, I'm not. I wouldn't, and this is where I do agree with McVay. I wouldn't prefer using a number one, a first round pick on a guy that I know I can't play first year. Or I know I can't play probably within the next 2 years. So he's a project. I've said it before in our previous episodes when we're covering draft. I don't want projects in the first round. But the Rams are not, not a team who they're a team they can handle projects. You know what I'm saying? They're already built to compete.
They are. They don't really have any weaknesses. I mean, every team can use upgrades, but they don't really have any weaknesses. They filled their holes in the secondary. They have a good front seven. I don't think they have a great offensive line, but it's above average.
I agree. But my biggest surprise from Thursday night, and you can say this for the whole draft, and I probably shouldn't be surprised about this, but I was shocked that Jerome Bettis was out there selecting for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round. I just knew it was going to be Aaron Rodgers. I assumed that this whole little bullshit they've been doing all offseason was just a rollout, but have him to come out there at the draft that's being hosted in Pittsburgh and say, hey, I'm back. Everybody, kiss my feet, do the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. And he wasn't there. See, and this is why I say this is more on me. I should not be shocked because I know Aaron Rodgers is a piece of shit.
Yes.
I know this. I should not be shocked that, that they're not even together. Pittsburgh's waiting on him. I'm assuming he's going to play football and assuming he's only going to play football in one place, and that's Pittsburgh. I don't know. Pittsburgh's not my thing. I have no real opinions about how they doing their quarterback search, but I'm gonna just blame Aaron Rodgers. Full of shit.
How are our boys at the Pittsburgh Steelers network doing? How are they feeling?
They,
I haven't checked on them in a while.
They're probably glazing this fourth straight tackle that they drafted in the first round. But topic for another show.
I know they're excited about Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf.
Yeah, but who's going to throw him the ball?
You said what?
Who's throwing them the ball, though?
I mean, even whoever's throwing the ball, you got a lot of skill overlap in those two guys. I mean, who's
Yeah.
lining up in the slot? Who's going to take the top off the defense?
I'm sure they'll figure it out. They'll stumble their way into 10 wins and a first round exit once again. But anyway, Daniel Thieneman, Q. I agree. There was no way. He was one of the guys that I did like coming into the draft. I'm like, okay, he's a guy that the Bears can use day one. He's got elite attributes. He's got, if we want to take this past sports, if you go to politics, the white man has been having a resurgence the last, 10 years or so.
The white man has been winning the last few years.
Yes. So it would not have shocked me that this would be a good pick for the Bears. Now, did I think he was going to last to 25? No. I felt like if the Bears were going to get him, they would have to trade up for him. And I was not keen on trading up on anybody in this draft. Like, you get best player available at 25.
You could have sold me on trading up for Ruben Bain only because of the slide and the importance of having an edge rusher. But yeah, no, you're right. There was nobody that was worth trading up unless you were going to get a discount on trading up. Like, I didn't want to trade next year's first. I didn't want to part with one of my second rounders. It would have been something, maybe a first and maybe next year's third. And you're unlikely to move up many spots with that type of capital.
Speaking of that, so he's the best player available at the board. Akeem Mesidor had went off the board like 2 picks before him.
And I wouldn't have minded him. I know there's a big to do about his age, but I feel like the Bears are in win now mode. So I could have lived with Akeem Mesidor at 25. With the way the draft board was falling, I could have lived with that.
How do you grade that pick? Is this an A-plus pick for the Bears?
I graded an A-plus. He was by far the best player on the draft board. And looking at the picks around him, the people around him, he's the guy that I know is going to come in day one and start. And not only is he going to come in day one and start, I feel like you got better at the safety position than you did last year. Brisker and Byard, they were I would rate them pretty adequate safeties to good, despite their flaws. You know, Brisker isn't the best in man coverage. Byard at this point in his career, and I don't think Byard was ever good in man coverage, but he's very smart. He understands angles in the pass game. He has high IQ, and he gets to the balls. But he gets to the balls, and he's good in zone. I think with Tiedemann and Kobe Bryant, they can do everything Brisker and Byard did, but they can do things Brisker and Byard couldn't do, and I think that's most important. So when you pair Tiedemann with Kobe Bryant, you're going to eliminate some of those things that plagued us last year, where San Francisco and Green Bay were kind of isolating our safeties and kind of taking advantage of us. Kobe Bryant and Thieneman aren't just two fast guys. I want Bears fans to understand. They're not just two fast guys, but they're guys with versatility. Kobe Bryant was a cornerback in college. He converted to safety, and he was a good enough cornerback in college that he was drafted to be a cornerback in the NFL. He retains those skills. Thieneman is a safety, but Thieneman is able to drop down into the box. He can cover a slot receiver. He can cover a real receiver. He has fluid hips. He's clean in and out, swiveling his hips. He's not clunky in coverage. This is the guy with attributes of a corner, size of a safety, and play safety. So I think you drafting Thieneman, you give a lot of versatility to that defense.
And one thing we know about Dennis Allen, he loves versatility in his guys, especially in the secondary. To your point, you can't disguise a lot of coverage what you got going on with Brisker and Byard. You know Brisker is better in the box. You know he's not going to really cover anybody like that. And if he is, you know you got barbecue chicken. And Byard, you know he's not coming down in the box. If you see him in the box, you know he's dropping out. So it's no real disguises. You know, you take away the element of surprise of what you do pre-snap. You're already playing a man down per se. In your defensive calls. And now with Thieneman and now with Kobe Bryant, you got the element of surprise. So yeah, I agree. This is an A-plus draft pick. The Bears lucked up to a gift on Thursday night. Y'all could take that pick and took ourselves in real good Thursday night. Now, there were some Bears fans who were saying, wait a second, wait 1 minute, Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson. Where is the edge rusher? Q, we already said best player available is Daniel Thieneman. Should they have traded back, or should they just say F best player available and got an edge rusher no matter what?
So I alluded to this in previous talks. I'm looking at the draft board, and with the Bears picked at 25, the only other first round edge rusher, and I didn't really have a first round grade on him, was Keldrick Falk. I think Keldrick Falk, and I alluded to this in my segment a few days ago. With edge rusher, you got to stop falling in love with what these guys do at the combine, because you're not running 40 yards on the field. You're not jumping to get to the quarterback. You're not bench pressing to get to the quarterback. Sure, if you can combine a great combine with the production, I'm all for it. I think Keldrick Falk had 6 sacks the last 2 years at Auburn. I think he had 2.5 last year. He looks the part. But this was the thing where I warned people about with Shamar Stewart last year, who culminated in 1 sack, and Tyree Wilson 2 years ago. We got to stop falling in love with how these edge rushers are built. We got to look at their film. We got to look at their plans, their pass rush plans, their pass rush ability. And what's very important is your agility and your counterattack moves. Some of these things with edge rusher are innate. I don't know when NFL scouts are going to realize this, but it doesn't work out often when you take the project with great athleticism and try to make him an edge rusher. Some of the edge rushing ability is innate. So looking around and saying best player available and take it, you might not get a guy that's going to beat out Austin Booker. So what good is it if you draft Keldrick Falk and he can't beat out Booker or Montez Sweat? And I'm going to be honest with you. Looking at the film, he's not a better pass rusher than Austin Booker right now. A lot will have to change between today and training camp for Keldrick Falk to upgrade your pass rush instead of Austin Booker. Now, what he can do, he's a little bit stronger and a physical guy than Austin Booker. I think he might hold up against the run a little better right now than Austin Booker, but that's not what you take a guy at 25 for. The problem with Bears fans is you all are so hung up on the penetration, and they're not worried about the stimulation. That back four is the stimulation. Let me tell you something. The defense is like a woman's body. You can't just penetrate and get the results you want.
Preach.
Okay? Dennis Allen understands it. I would say our defensive coordinator and our front office understands that. We're treating this defense like a woman's body. You know, sometimes you got to start at the back and work your way to the front, or you got to start at the top and work your way. You know, we all want to get to the same place eventually, but sometimes when you get there, it's not about how you get in there, it's how you start. And then you can finish up real quickly. Then you're in there and you're real good. If you can confuse the quarterback, you ain't got to just penetrate and rush him right away and just sack and get all hands-on with him. I don't know how much of this you're going to edit out because you're uncomfortable with it, but I want you to keep all this. There's more ways to get to the quarterback than one. Dennis Allen will utilize things like blitzes, and with that versatility that Thieneman and Kobe Bryant do, you got guys who can blitz from different angles. You got guys that can put a delayed blitz together. And Dennis Allen was doing these things in New Orleans when he had the personnel, when you had a Tyrann Mathieu back there. When you got guys with speed, you don't have to get them right on the line of scrimmage when they blitz. You got Devin Bush. That's another piece. That's another speedy guy. So you can bring pressure in all different angles besides just with your front four. And I think that's one of the things that Dennis Allen specialized. I think that's one of the things you'll see with the Bears. And you also got to understand that we took a guy in the second round last year, Shamar Turner. We didn't get to see a lot of him, but he's a guy they're counting on. So, and if he pans out like the rest of that draft class did, we're looking at a solid starting piece. I'm not happy with Dayo Adebango. I'm not happy with what Grady Jarrett gave us, but you spend a lot of money on these guys. So the hope is that one of them can bounce back and be a productive player. Austin Booker, I've spoken on him the last couple of times. This is an ascending type player. And if you look at his pass rush grades from week 10 to the playoffs, he was in fact, I'll go one step further. I think Austin Booker was as good or better of a pass rusher than Montez Sweat was in the second half of the season. And Montez Sweat put together a pretty good season, another 10-sack season. So I think it's reasonable that you could see Austin Booker take that next step as a pass rusher and see a guy that can get 11 sacks. And now you have two bookend edges that get you 10 plus sacks. I think any Bears fan would be happy for that. You got to see if Javon Dexter can take another step. You got to see if Shamar Turner can have an impact. Maybe Neville, who they signed in the offseason, can put together one of his best seasons. So I don't want Bears fans to sound so defeated. I understand. Pass rush was a thing that maybe the weakness of our defense last year.
There's
But
no
you got to look
maybe.
at it, yeah, well, run defense, but I guess that plays into the defensive line too. But I think you're looking at the way Poles is, and you mentioned this when I talked about losing all the guys in the secondary. Maybe Ryan Poles is saying some of the issues of the pass rush is that the guys in the back end weren't covering. So you didn't have a quarterback that had to get to his third read or had to be uncomfortable. Things were open for him, and he could sit in the pocket comfortably. He could throw right off his back foot on his 3-step, 5-step, 7-step drop and just release the ball. So maybe you get better in the secondary, healthy Kyler Gordon, healthy Jalen Johnson, improved safeties. Maybe you get some more cover sacks. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, how many cover sacks did you see last year?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. And that's another thing. I was going to come back to that in a second. Because we're recording this. The Bears did just complete their 2026 draft. They drafted Jordan Vandenberg from Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
He's a defensive lineman. Oh, Bears fans, be happy. The Bears did draft a defensive lineman this draft.
Let me add to that is I know he was drafted in the 6th round, and so typically 6th rounders don't give you a lot of production. To that I say Kyle Monangai, we thought the Bears ignored running back last year. Kyle Monangai was a 7th round pick. Ended up being he had to be one of the best gems in the entire draft. Not just for us. I'm talking about the entire draft. He was a guy who, while not a starter, Kyle Monangai ran for nearly 800 yards and didn't get that many snaps until Roshan Johnson did his normal thing and just became unavailable. And then Kyle Monangai made Roshan Johnson just unnecessary. So maybe Jordan Vandenberg can be this year's Kyle Monangai. If he's the equivalent of Kyle Monangai, then we're off to a pretty good start. Now I feel a lot better about our defensive line.
The Bears did end their draft with a defensive lineman, Jordan Vandenberg, from Georgia Tech. The point that I want to bring up, not that he's a defensive lineman, but he's from Georgia Tech. You said earlier that you didn't grade Kevin Falk that high. I just want to repeat what you said. It made no sense in drafting a guy that you don't even think can beat out your worst rotational guy. All right. Counterpoint. What if you draft a guy on the next day, on Friday, day 2 of the draft, day 3 of the draft? You dig into that weakness. You get a couple of big bodies who can be rotational players. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a star, somebody who could be opposite Montez Sweat, but you can have rotational guys in there that can, that can make an impact. That's a thing, right? So moving on to day 2, the Bears did not draft a defensive lineman at all in day 2. They went center, Logan Jones from the University of Iowa. They went tight end, Sam Roche from Stanford University, Xavier Thomas, wide receiver from LSU. I did say Jordan Vandenberg from Georgia Tech. Right, the second guy the Bears selected, Logan Jones from University of Iowa. Third guy, Sam Roche, Stanford University. What is up with Poles and these nerd school football players?
Sam Poles is sapiosexual. So he wants somebody that's you ask me, if you ask me my opinion, don't laugh when I give you my answer. He's a sapiosexual. He likes guys from these Ivy League schools. What else can I say?
Yeah.
Wasn't Drew Dahlman from Stanford too? The recently retired center?
Velas Jones, to say another name. Amagaji, another nerd.
From Brown.
I think you're right. I think you're onto something. Ryan Poles, who's also from a nerd school himself. Ryan Poles has a fetish for dorks.
He has a fetish for dorks. Yes, he does.
He has a fetish for dorks in pads. I don't know if I hate it or I don't know. I just know I notice it. I don't know if I hate it yet. But I'm a meathead if I say, give me some more guys from Miami. Even though Miami's a nerd school too.
Listen, but Miami, you might think them a nerd school, but on that football field, those are thugs.
Yes.
I wouldn't mind a few more thugs. If I will say one thing, I like my offensive linemen from the Big Ten. Give me one of those country-fed Midwestern guys who wrestled in high school and had a wrestling scholarship and chose to play football. I like a Logan Jones. He's already balding, by the way, too. I need my offensive lineman a little ugly. I don't need a handsome offensive lineman. I need a guy that's 22 that looks like he's 30. And that's what Logan Jones is.
Let's talk about Logan. Let's stay right there. So Logan, center from the University of Iowa. Q, what do you grade this? We gave Dylan Thielemann a A+. What's the grade on this?
I grade Logan Jones an A.
Wow.
The only reason you got a guy like him, because I think he's going to start over Bradbury. I don't know when, but I think he's going to start over him. I think he's a better player than Bradbury is right now. This is a guy that last year at Iowa in the Big Ten saw plenty of NFL caliber talent, including Caden McDonald, who was the guy on the Bears' radar. Not only did he not give up a sack last year with guys like Caden McDonald lined up over him, he didn't give up a pressure last year. This is a guy that's athletic. He's a little bit undersized. I don't worry about my center being a little bit undersized if they're smart, because the biggest thing that you want from a center is you want a guy of high intelligence. You want a guy of high IQ, and you want a guy who's mobile. He's all of what I just named. I think he's going to be the guy that's giving snaps to Caleb Williams for the next decade.
So ESPN.com.
Team captain, 4-year center. Yeah, those are the things you want on the offensive line. Those attributes, those are the things you want. And I know leadership could sometimes be overrated, but when you talk about the center, when you talk about offensive linemen, you want high IQ guys and leaders, because out of everybody on the team, they've got to be a cohesive unit. You just can't be a standout athlete or player on the offensive line. You got to be smart. You got to be cohesive. You want to have leadership and communication skills, because you got to be able to see what everybody else sees, most importantly, your quarterback. And you got to be able to communicate that to everybody on the offensive line and your quarterback. So I love the Logan Jones pick. Loved it. Loved it almost as much as Thieneman.
What about anybody that was else on the board at that decision?
I really like Jermod McCoy, but I don't know if you're familiar with the issues he has. You know, he didn't pass a lot of teams' medicals. I think he's a top 10 talent. He ran a 4.37, even though he missed last season with an ACL, but I get it. I can't get too mad at the Bears for passing on him, because everybody passed on Jermod McCoy. So I guess I'm guessing those things are an issue. Anybody else on the board that I thought the Bears, I really like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, but you already took a safety and you signed Kobe Bryant. So at that point, if you would have drafted McNeil-Warren, that would have just been just greed. I like Anthony Hill Jr., who went right after. He's a linebacker, but you got TJ Edwards and you got Devin Bush. I don't know how much Anthony Hill Jr. could have figured in to your plans this year. You're not going to be using a lot of 3 linebackers. This 2026 in the NFL. You're playing nickel 70% of the time. You might be in a 4-3, maybe 15 to 20 snaps a game. That's not enough to draft a guy in the second round. Jake Slaughter, he was another nice center, but I prefer Logan Jones. There was really nobody else that I would have said, man, I would have rather had than Logan Jones. Yeah, I don't see anybody, not at the edge. Denny Denai Sutton from Penn State, he was a guy that intrigued me, a guy that I think has a chance to be a very good rotational player, but I wouldn't take a rotational edge over a center that's going to start for the next 10 years, protecting my most important asset to my team. So, no, I have no complaints with what the Bears did in the second round.
Now, the guy that was drafted right after Logan Jones, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, that was another guy that I thought would have failed the Bears in the first round. Obviously, he was still on the board.
Very surprised he didn't hear his name called on day one.
Yeah, very surprised. I didn't really have a favorite for the Bears at 25. If you told me McNeil-Warren, I'd have been cool. If you told me Keem Messidor, I'd have been cool. Lomu, cool. Just whatever. Because a lot of those guys, and we talked about this on previous shows, a lot of those guys have a similar grade. So when you brought up Emmanuel McNeil-Warren still being available at that position, and Logan Jones was drafted, and you're saying it makes no sense to draft him because that had just been the Bears drafting things they don't need, being greedy. Segue Q. The next pick the Bears made on day 2 of the draft was in round 3. 12 picks later, after drafting Logan, they drafted a tight end. Q, how many tight ends were featured prominently on the Bears in 2025?
At the beginning of the season, it was really just Cole Kmet. When you got towards the midseason, you were doing 2 tight ends with Colson Loveland. But what a lot of people don't realize is near the end of the season, the Bears ran a lot of 13 personnel. Nobody ran as much 13 personnel as the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe if I go into my advanced analytics and my numbers, the Bears ran 13 personnel, maybe the third or fourth most of any teams in the NFL after week 12. In fact, you saw that a lot in the playoffs. You saw Durham Smith a lot. You saw him make a couple catches. And it was not that Colston or Cole Kmet were injured. They were playing a lot of 3 tight end sets.
True. They were injured. I think them being injured is not necessarily the point. I think the injury to Ozzie Trapillo played a lot into that as well, especially in the playoffs.
That's a great point. That could be a reason why they went to a lot of 3 tight end sets, a lot of 13 personnel looks. And as you've noted, we probably won't see Ozzie Trapillo this year.
Mm-mm.
And what we know about Roche is he's a big kid. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I believe he's 6'6", 267.
Yeah.
And a really good blocker, even though he has kind of short arms. Isn't he a really good run blocker and pretty good in pass pro?
You know how Bears fans get. We're at a fever pitch. At what point do we get this defensive lineman, this edge rusher? Now, we know Kevin Falk and some of the rest of them that was available at this point are probably not better than what we already have. But any addition is still better than no addition, right, Q?
For the most part, yes. Yes, because having said what I said about grading those edge rushers, at the end of the day, if it was just as simple as grades, we wouldn't make a big deal of the NFL draft. And it would be an exact science. And we wouldn't need the later rounds, or they wouldn't be as intricate with teams trading up and trading down, because we would know. So yes, at a certain point, you should take a guy who probably is maybe not highly graded or splitting hairs, maybe not better than your best player available, but still fits a need. At a certain point of the draft, you do have to start looking need. And I'm a best player available guy. I am best player available. But when you get to the 3rd and 4th rounds, the argument is maybe sometimes you feel needs there. I know a lot of people will feel in the 1st round you feel needs. I don't like to do that with my 1st round pick. I need to get a player. I need to get a playmaker. I feel like in your 1st round, you should be shooting for a guy that can get to the 2nd contract with you and be a star. And no question asked, a starter. So I definitely like BPA in round 1, unless, of course, you got a quarterback. You can't do BPA when you already got a stud at quarterback, because you can't play 2 quarterbacks. But I kind of get sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, if Ryan Pohl's draft board had Sam Roche highly graded, who am I to say he should have picked up an edge? Because got to go back to what I said earlier. You pick a guy in the 3rd round. What if you pick a Zach Pickens? That was our 3rd round interior guy we picked a few years ago. He's not even on the team anymore. And he never had an impact on this team. So would I rather get a 3rd tight end, and we're going to be in 13 personnel, 20 snaps, and he's a guy that could come in and we won't miss too much of a beat if a Cole Kmet or Colson Loveland has to miss a little bit of time? That's the argument for Sam Roche to me.
And the other argument is, how does this help the Bears in 2026? The window is now. The opportunity to strike while Caleb is still cheap, while all of our ops are still weak. The opportunity is now. I'm a harbor what all the other meatheads in navy and orange are saying. Any addition is better than no addition. I get the fact that none of these guys are going to be, I guess, world beaters at this point. At least you don't grade them that way. But a 3rd tight end, there's not enough 13 in the world that you can convince me of with retaining Cal Monangai, DeAndre Swift, Luther Burton, and Roma Dunze. There's not enough in the world to make this pick make that much sense to me.
The only way it makes sense is if you had a trade involving Cole Kmet to land an edge. And we're at the end of the draft. It doesn't look like you have that.
Mm-hmm. All right. And you're grading this as what?
This pick, I'm gonna give this pick a C. I'm not in love with it. I'm not in love with it from a fit standpoint. I'm not in love with it from a player standpoint. If you want to ask me about guys who are still available, who I probably would have been a little bit more excited that the Bears picked, Keontae Scott from Miami, one of the guys that you talk about. He's a corner. He's a little small, so maybe you got to play it. I know he played at the nickel, but I don't know if you watch a lot of Miami football. That guy was all over the field. Out of Gordon type. I don't know if you can kick Kyler outside or if you can kick Keontae Scott outside. And to be honest with you, with the way Kyler is with his durability issues, I'm not sure you don't like a Keontae Scott in the third round just in case Kyler can't stay healthy. If you were to ask me who was still available on the board, who I'd maybe Jamar McCoy, because that's a guy who, boy, if Jamar McCoy is healthy, that's a top 10 talent. I think in the third round, I don't know about you, but maybe that's the time where you want to get risky, especially when the payoff can be a starting cornerback and with elite physical traits and a guy who was going to be a top 10 pick if everything checked out. So maybe McCoy would have been better. Denny Denai Sutton, who I talked about earlier, he's an edge. He's a guy that would have slotted right real good in that third round. So those are just a few of the names I can think of. Maybe even a Mike Washington, running back from Arkansas. He's a guy who he had a killer workout. I think he ran, what did he run in the 4.3s?
Yeah.
The running back from Arkansas. Yeah, he ended up going in the fourth round. So I think there were guys at that point where, yeah, I could see Bears fans' complaints. There were guys that I say, yeah, I'm scrolling through the list. Not too many names pop out, but those names certainly pop out, which I think you could have picked. A Chris Bell from Louisville. I know you aren't excited about them taking receivers, but he was a guy that was available. Speaking of receivers, Chris Brazell III from Tennessee. These are guys, Zachariah Branch, these are guys that had a name and were guys who were bantied about as possible second round in the first round guys, especially Zachariah Branch, who slipped into the third round. So I don't think receiver was the biggest need, but you did just lose DJ Moore. And Zachariah Branch is the guy with some athleticism, a little bit undersized, but yeah, at that point, I could see where Bears fans have a complaint because you're talking about a third tight end. There were definitely guys. Oh, Malachi Fields. He was a guy I covered in the Senior Bowl. Big guy, big frame, possession receiver, could be used in a red zone. He was the guy that went a few picks after the Bears took Roche.
The next guy the Bears took. Before we go on to the next picks, the Bears pick of Sam Roche, Athletic is grading it as a C, ESPN is graded as a C, and CBS Sports is grading it as an A. I think CBS Sports is terrible, but an A.
They graded it as A?
An A. I think they're terrible, but, to each his own. Moving on. Q, while we talked about the Bears being gluttonous and drafting players that they absolutely do not need and absolutely have really no plans for, at least makes no sense they would have an idea to play for, we have their pick in the late third round. The last pick they made on day 2, pick number 89, Xavier Thomas, wide receiver from LSU, 5'10", 192 pounds. Q, you've been very, very complimentary of the draft so far. Is that going to stay with this pick?
I'll be honest with you. That pick is a certified head scratcher. He was a guy that pre-draft, even when we got near the draft, nobody had him graded as a top 90 player. And you took him at 89. And there was still a lot of meat left on the bone. There was still a lot of meat left on the bone at that pick. No, I can't be complimentary. I will say this, though. I didn't understand the Colson Loveland pick last year. And, man, that pick is an A+ right now. That's an A+. Yeah, I don't get this one. I'm going to extend grace because under Ben Johnson, we got 12 wins, including the playoffs. So I'm going to give a little grace to this one, but no, I don't have anything complimentary to say about it other than that Xavier gives the Bears kind of what's the element that I think element they could use. I won't say completely missing because Luther Burden and Roma Dunze they're not slow guys at all. Burden is a 4-4 guy. Home ran a 4-3-5, I think. Rome doesn't really play at a 4-3-5, but that's what he ran. That's what his tape is. He doesn't that's his official measure, but he doesn't play that fast on tape. But we have we have decent speed. When you got Xavion out there, you're a really athletic team. You are a team that really puts a lot of pressure on the defensive secondary, a guy running 4-2-8. If he could play football. Because now you're lining up a 4-2-8 guy, a 4-3 guy, a 4-4 guy, and you got Colson Loveland, who's probably a 4-5, 4-6 guy, and an athletic route runner tight end. Now you can put four guys on the field, including DeAndre Swift, who times in a 4-3, 4-4 range. You put a lot of speed on the field at the skill position. And your quarterback is a fast guy. Hit 22 miles an hour a few times. So you do put a lot of speed and athleticism on the field. But my only issue with Xavion Thomas is not the acquisition of the guy. It's where you drafted the guy. I am pretty sure Xavion would have been there in the 4th round. But I'm sure he would have been there in the 5th round. I'm just going to be honest with you. And if you really felt really good about him, take him there. But I'm sure he would have been around in the 5th where you took Keyshawn Elliott. So, yeah, I'm not going to give that one a high grade.
ESPN is saying that they had him ranked as a round 7 pick, regardless of his speed. And you did mention that 4-2-8. That is some elite level speed. That is some track athlete type speed. But are we the Chicago Bears or are we the LA Raiders? I mean, what are we doing here, bro?
Yeah, the Raiders were known for doing that, and they still do that, where they get guys who are fast and can't play football. Hopefully, this is the fast guy that can do things on the football field. I don't know. There's not a whole lot of production in college, so I'm not sure.
The last thing I'm gonna say on this, Xavion Thomas got a C+ from CBS Sports.
That was generous, I think.
Yeah, because the ESPN gives it an F, and
I can't
so
argue
does
with
the
an F.
Athletic.
I wonder if he got a C just because of how fast his 40 was. I mean, if
He's
that's
got
the
to be a
case,
kick returner. He's got.
but unless you're Devin Hester, do you take a kick returner 3rd or 2nd rounds? Like when the Bears,
we talking about the same franchise that took a punter in the 4th round.
I get it. And Devin Hester, even though he was a kick returner, and that was his calling card when the Bears took him out of Miami. I don't know if you remember. He was a corner, but he wasn't an everyday corner for Miami. He was kind of a, sub package guy. I got it then because Devin Hester was extremely productive as a kick returner, even in college, historically productive and dangerous. This guy's been a good kick returner, but he hasn't been, I wouldn't call this guy the best kick returner in college. And I don't think his kick return ability is good enough for you to draft him in the 3rd round. And in
Yes.
today's NFL, and in
Yes,
today, we got to remember when Devin Hester was picked, the kickoff rules were different. I know we got the landing zone and different rules again, but kickoffs were a thing. They were important. Now they are getting more importance, but 3rd round importance, I can't see it. I don't care if he's a kick returner. Unless he's Devin Hester, the only kick returner in the Hall of Famer, he's got to play on the field. He's got to be a receiver that gets 20 to 30 snaps a game and has an impact for that pick to be justified.
I agree, Q. Kick returning is overrated.
That's not what I said because I know where you're going.
That's what you said.
You don't want Devin Hester. You don't want Devin Hester in the Hall of Fame. That's what you're doing.
I ain't say it.
I know that's what you're doing.
I didn't say that.
Did you think Devin Hester belonged in the Hall of Fame? Just give me a yes or no.
No.
Exactly.
No. But shout out to him for getting there. Hey, look, this country is built on the wrong people getting into situations that they don't belong to be. So
you're not
if one of us got
Devin
in there,
Hester to Donald Trump. That's not what you're gonna do. I'm gonna cut through the BS and the red tape. That's not what we're gonna do. Because this is why we're not gonna do that. Devin Hester was a football player at the end of the day. Donald Trump is the president and was never a politician. Wasn't even a good CEO of whatever companies he decided to run. He had no business being as president of the United States. At least Devin Hester's resume says he wasn't a DEI hire. Donald Trump is a DEI hire. A very unqualified man who only got it because he's a white man. Let's just I'm just gonna have to be honest. I know everybody's not gonna like that. That was your DEI hire, America. That's your biggest DEI hire
of all time.
of all time. Yeah, there's been a few more.
I won't argue with you. All right, let's move on to day 3, final day of the draft. Like I said, the Bears did just complete their 2026 draft, drafting the guy from Georgia Tech, defensive lineman Vanderberg. Q, I'm going to let you drive this ship because I'm like Vrabel. I was not present for the last day of the draft. I went to go see the Michael Jackson movie and did some other shit. It's a nice day outside. I'm sorry. So Q, tell
Speaking of
us.
lies being told, okay, I don't know much about Jordan Vanderberg. In my college football watching of last year, he never was a guy that I took notice to. Even when I watched a few minutes of Georgia Tech football, he seems like a guy that's probably a project guy, a guy you develop. Oh, from the analysis, I get it, and we're not going to complain about 6 round picks. When you take a guy like that, you see flashes and you want to hope that maybe you got a steal or that you can make those flashes become consistent. So I have no complaints about him. You took a guy who was a starter in college, did some things, and you want to see if maybe he can grow. So no complaints about Jordan Vanderberg in the 6th round. You're just getting bodies. He could factor in a little bit on special teams, although you don't see defensive linemen too much on special teams. But maybe he'll be on kickoff coverage blocking, or maybe he'll one of those things.
Let's go to the 4th round pick from the Chicago Bears. We did draft a cornerback, Malik Muhammad, 6 feet from Texas. This was a solid grade, at least from ESPN, and the Athletic give it a solid grade. So, Q, you got any thoughts on this one?
I thought the Bears could use not necessarily upgrade a cornerback, but competition, because
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Johnson will be in trenches, your starter on one side, provided he's healthy. The other side, you'll probably be running it back with Tyreek Stevenson. As we know, in Tyreek Stevenson's tumultuous Bears career, he's had to earn it every training camp. He's never come in entrenched as a starter, somewhat due to his own doing. Like, there's been times where his off-field things or on-field things, I shouldn't say off-field because he hasn't really gotten in any trouble, but it's just the extra things he does on field, from personal fouls to the Fail Mary to inconsistent play. You know, you bring up maturity issues. So you take a guy who's like Malik Muhammad, who was a starter, and he had a really good game against Ohio State, covering a guy who we're going to be talking about next year a lot at this time, Jeremiah Smith, a guy who will probably be going top 5, higher than a lot of the quarterbacks. So he did a really good job on that and covering him. And he did a lot of man coverage on that guy. So this is a guy with upside, not mad at it. Didn't really watch him a lot at Texas. I saw the Texas Ohio State game. He was very good in that game. I heard he has some inconsistencies, but he's a 4th round pick. You're not going to get a perfectly graded prospect in the 4th round. So I'm just excited to see what he does in camp. We do have a need at cornerback because Jalen is your starter, but he had durability issues last year, even a couple years ago. Kyler Gordon, durability issues. So you need some help at that corner position, particularly the outside corner position. So guy that could get meaningful snaps next year.
The Athletic has him graded as a 3rd-round pick. The Bears ended up getting in the 4th round. So from that standpoint, you can start to understand why he's graded so high. As you see right here on the screen, ESPN has him as an 80. CBS also has him as a B grade. But I want to dig deep into his profile provided by the Athletic. He's a tall, skinny athlete who could be out-muscled at times. That's the first thing. As a corner in this day and age, you definitely don't like to hear that you can get bullied. We've seen that enough from the last season. There was some particular times. Shout out to the Pro Bowler Nashawn. There were times that he got bullied out the way, not just not just routed up, but he just got pushed out the way sometimes. So if we're just taking that into account, just want to make that a note. Now he's coming straight from college. He doesn't have his grown man strength yet. So those type of things.
And he's young. He
Yeah.
he declared early for the draft. He's only 21. He had a senior year to go. I'm sure that they're going to put they're going to get him. The first thing you're going to do is you got to get him in the weight room and give him a pro NFL strength and conditioning program
Right.
because at 182 at 6 foot, he's light in the back pockets. And as you said, and Nashawn is probably stronger than him. Nashawn, the guys that I can recall bullying him are guys that are going to bully a lot of guys. But AJ Brown and T. Higgins, Muhammad ain't got no choice. He ain't got a chance against them two guys this year. Or DK Metcalf. We won't see DK Metcalf unless, of course, the Steelers somehow make it to the Super Bowl to play us next year. But yeah, guys like AJ Brown, guys like T. Higgins, even Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a squat guy, and he's really strong off the line of scrimmage. You're gonna have trouble jamming those guys at the pro level.
And other things in his tape, other than his inability to win physical battles, gets bullied by receivers. Yeah, I talked about his frame, below average frame, but his speed. He has outstanding stopwatch time, but it doesn't show up on tape consistently. He struggles to make up lost ground once receivers gain a step. He has good hip mobility, but tends to get upright in his pedal and can get back shouldered by quarterbacks anticipating his aggression. There's going to be a lot of work for this kid. Fourth round draft pick, so you expect that. You expect fourth round draft picks to be projects, so it's not that big of a deal. Just want to put that out there so everybody understands that going in.
I did want to add one thing that a guy like him, picking in the fourth round, the other thing is we got to think about the third phase and how he plays into that. This could be a guy used as a gunner on punt returns. He has good stopwatch speed, may not play like it, but on punt returns, you're running down the field. So he timed it a 4.42. That is speed you could use as a gunner on punts. Also, a guy you can use maybe on kick coverage. So you gotta remember that thing when you're drafting rounds 4 and back. That some of those guys you're looking at to play special teams with possible upside of contributing on your offense or defense. But at this point, he could be a guy that offers you help on kick coverage and punt coverage, and maybe even on kick return and punt return. Maybe not necessarily as a returner, but as one of those corners on punt return. So just wanted to add that.
I mean, it's and I want to move on to the next guy real fast, but to that point, also in his player profile, he does have special teams experience,
There
but
you go.
is inconsistent with blocking and his jam skills. So, project.
Probably got to put some weight for those jams. He definitely got to, if he's going to play special teams on that kick coverage and block, you're going to want to see that guy get to 190.
At least. Keyshawn Elliott. The Bears drafted him in the 5th round. This is a trade. This is a massive trade the Bears was a part of. He's a linebacker from Arizona State. Shout out to the Sun Devils. Another failing grade from ESPN. Q, what is your thoughts on him?
Probably a special teams guy. You lost. Well, you gained Jack Sanborn. Nashawn, actually, even though he was a starter, he played some special teams. You lost Jonathan Owens. And Jonathan Owens was a big impact on all 4 phases. Keyshawn Elliott is a guy who's a little bit bigger than Jonathan Owens, but I'm sure when you're looking at him, you're probably looking at a guy that's going to contribute on 4 phases. So I would pass him on to the special teams coach because let's be honest, in the 5th round, you're probably not going to compete for a starting job. And if you're not competing for a starting job, what do you need to do to make the team as a 5th round pick? Going to need to play special teams. So Keyshawn, your NFL pathway right now, I know you were linebacker ASU. Maybe you turn out to be Lance Briggs, but your best bet is to get on special teams. Things I read on him are troubling. Little undersized, misses a lot of tackles, get caught in the wash. Yikes.
I'm going to read some of his strengths. He has adequate arm length and firm muscle in his upper and lower half. So, I mean, he looks good for a linebacker. He mirrors well at the line with a great feel for sifting and driving, plays with confidence to fly to the football, and they liken him to Fred Warner in that respect. He's an extra coach on the field as well. He communicates calls to all his teammates. He's described as an A-plus kid with grown man maturity and grown man strength. So all of these things sound good, but let's talk about those weaknesses. In this day and age, you want to be very twitchy. You want to be an athlete, and they say he is an average athlete, especially in the twitch department. He lacks suddenness, getting off the blocks. Climbers can take him for a ride if they want to. He doesn't always feel blockers in his peripherals, and he gets trapped inside sometimes. So it's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth, saying that he can he can mirror the line well, but also gets caught in the wash. His over pursuit leads to missed tackles, like you said, and he's pretty limited in coverage and struggles to find the right eye balance. So again, with day 3 guys, you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see guys with more so projects, guys who's probably may tap out at special teams, but the Bears did have a need for linebacker. So that's the Bears draft, Q. I got 2 questions to close up. One, did the Bears do enough in this draft to three-peat, well, 4-peat as the offseason champion?
No. We relinquished that. The offseason champion title is the Giants to me. With the Raiders close behind. I like the Raiders draft too.
Sidebar, whose draft? You like the Raiders draft? Or some other drafts you like? Anybody in NFC North?
Well, the Packers didn't have first round picks. I thought the Vikings. Yeah, they do. I thought the Vikings reached pretty bad in the first round. I'm not saying Caleb Banks isn't a good player, but man, I think that guy you could have gotten in the second round, or you could have traded back to the end of the first round and got him. The Lions, I thought that was solid. Which tackle did they draft? Yeah, they got the lesser of the 2 tackles, to be honest with you. I thought Monroe, that was a guy that if he fell to 25, I would have loved to get him. The kid from Arizona State, which Pittsburgh got, I thought Blake Miller really got him third among the 3 tackles that went in that area in that run. So I don't think he was a bad pick. That's another one. I thought the Vikings and Lions both they shot their load too early. I think they got solid players, but I think those players would have been available later. And I think there was better players on the board for both of those teams to get. I'm not in love with the Lions draft. Let me see what they did later to refresh my memory. Derek Moore's solid. They got Roeder, like you said. He's a local guy. I get that. I like the Bears draft over the Lions draft. Minnesota, they did have one pick I liked. Not in love with Caleb Banks in the first round. Jake Gaudet, that's an interesting pick at linebacker. I think, man, he really matches what kind of they've had going with these big physical linebackers who can rush the passer and be stout against the run. I like their second round pick. I thought they got good value on the Claiborne kid in the 6th round of running back. He might be able to come in and get a few carries for them. I like the Bears draft over the rest of the NFC North draft. I didn't like what a lot of the teams in the NFC North did.
Bear down.
Bear down.
Appreciate you tapping into this latest episode from the Frustrated Chicago Sports Fan channel. Don't matter if you was watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple. Make sure you like, subscribe, share with everybody on the block, and hit the notification bell so you never miss none of our daily drops. And to all the guys from the shy, we say 3 things. Bear down, fly the W, and sell the team, Jerry.